My son said I should be grateful because he still answered my calls. In a cold way, as if I were a problem to manage, not his father who had sacrificed everything for him. I could hear my daughter-in-law's soft laughter in the background. But before continuing, check if you've subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? Dad, you should be thankful that we still answer your calls, said Richard, my only son, with that condescending tone he'd adopted toward me in recent years. I stayed silent, gripping the phone tightly, while I heard Charlotte, my daughter-in-law, chuckling softly in the background. A laugh that told me everything I needed to know about what they really thought of me. Thankful? I repeated finally. For what exactly? For everything we're doing for you, he replied impatiently. Managing your accounts, paying your bills, organizing your life. You wouldn't have to worry about anything if you just let us handle it all. I wanted to remind him that for 40 years I'd been the chief accountant at a major hospital, that I'd raised 2 children alone after my wife passed away, that I'd balanced family budgets during times of rampant inflation. But instead, I just took a deep breath. I didn't know I needed to show gratitude for something you offered to do. Dad? Interrupted Charlotte with her artificially sweet voice. You said yourself you were getting confused with all those numbers. We're just helping like you asked. But I'd never said that. I'd never asked for that help. It started subtly, a few months after I moved closer to them following my retirement. First, it was the suggestion to set up automatic debits. Then came the idea of a power of attorney, just for emergencies. After that, papers to sign during Sunday lunch, always presented in a hurry, always when I was distracted. I'm hanging up now, I replied, surprisingly calm. We'll talk later. After hanging up, the house felt too quiet. I made some tea and sat at the kitchen table, where I'd helped Richard with his homework so many times, where I'd planned birthdays, calculated budgets, written cards for my late wife Elizabeth. What hurt most wasn't their distrust of my abilities, but the cruelty disguised as care. You should be grateful. As if my existence were a burden they generously bore. The next morning, I called the bank. After several security confirmations, the clerk informed me that my mailing address had been changed 6 months ago. Now, all my statements were being sent directly to Richard and Charlotte's address in New York City. And are there any automatic transfers set up on my account? I asked, trying to control the tremor in my voice. Yes, sir. There's a monthly transfer to a joint account in the name of Richard and Charlotte Morrison. It started in February. The amount she mentioned was nearly half my pension. Money I didn't know was being withdrawn month after month, silently. Was that authorized by me? I asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, sir. It was approved digitally through your online access. I remembered then, 3 months back, when Richard came over to help with the computer. He stood behind me, guiding where to click, what to approve. It's just to update the security system, Dad. Trust me, and I did trust him. How could I not trust my own son? After hanging up, I stared out the kitchen window at the garden. The hydrangeas I'd planted last year were blooming, strong and vibrant. I'd nurtured them from scratch, carefully, patiently, just as I'd raised my son, just as I'd built my life. In that moment, something shifted inside me. It wasn't exactly rage, it was more like waking from a long sleep. I saw with crystal clarity what was happening. It wasn't protection, it was appropriation. It wasn't care, it was control. And I realized I had a choice. I could continue being the docile, grateful father they wanted me to be, fading away slowly while they managed my life to the end. Or I could show them exactly who I was, the man who survived losing his wife at 43, raised 2 children alone, worked 2 jobs to pay for college, and became the first man to reach the position of chief financial officer at Boston General Hospital. The next day, I put on my best outfit, a navy blue suit I saved for special occasions. I applied aftershave and took a cab downtown. My destination wasn't the local bank where Richard had kindly helped me set everything up. It was the Central Bank in Chicago, where I'd opened my first account 4 decades ago. It was time to reclaim my life, one document at a time. The bank manager, Mr. Parker, was a man in his 50s with kind eyes behind thin-framed glasses. He listened to my story attentively, without interrupting, taking occasional notes. Unfortunately, Mr. Edward, what you're describing is far more common than we'd like, he said when I finished. It's called financial elder abuse, and we've seen a significant increase in recent years. Abuse. The word hit me like a slap. It was ugly, harsh, definitive, but accurate. What can I do? I asked, keeping my voice steady. We can start by blocking the automatic transfers and revoking your son's digital access to your account. We'll issue new cards and passwords and change the mailing address back to yours. He hesitated, adjusting his glasses. I should warn you that your son will likely be notified of these changes by the system. Let him be notified, I replied, feeling a determination I hadn't experienced in years. I have nothing to hide. While Mr. Parker worked on the computer, implementing the changes I'd requested, I sat thinking about how I'd gotten to this point. How my son, the little boy I'd cradled in my arms, had transformed into someone capable of treating me this way. It had been gradual, I realized. It started shortly after I moved closer to them 3 years ago. Small comments about how I was mixing up dates, exaggerated concerns when I forgot something trivial, little offers of help that, looking back, were the first steps toward taking control. All done, Mr. Edward, said Mr. Parker, pulling me back to reality. Your new card's PIN will arrive in separate correspondence. We've also blocked any attempts to access your account without your physical presence and ID here at the branch. He handed me a card. This is Dr. Catherine Sanders, a lawyer specializing in elder rights. I strongly suggest you consult her. She can help with protective measures beyond what we can do here at the bank. I thanked him and tucked the card into my pocket. On the way home, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief at having taken the first steps to reclaim my autonomy. Sadness that those steps were necessary. The phone was already ringing when I walked in. Richard's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. It rang again, 10 minutes later. And again. On the 6th call, I finally answered. Dad, what the hell did you do? His voice shook with rage. I just got notifications from the bank saying my access to your account was revoked and the transfers canceled. Yes, I replied calmly. I made some changes today. Changes? You can't just do that. We had an agreement. What agreement, Richard? The one where you transfer my money to your account without telling me? Or the one where you changed my mailing address so I'd never see my own bank statements? Silence on the other end. Then his voice shifted, adopting that conciliatory tone I was starting to hate. Dad, you're confused. We talked about this, remember? You agreed it would be simpler if we managed everything for you. I never agreed to that, I replied firmly. I never agreed to you withdrawing half my pension every month. I never agreed to you hiding my bank documents from me. It's for your own good, he exploded finally. Do you think you can handle everything alone at your age? You didn't even notice what we were doing for 6 months. His brutal honesty was almost refreshing. Finally, the true face behind the mask of concern. I didn't notice because I trusted you, I replied. That was my mistake. I won't repeat it. What does that mean? He asked, his voice suddenly cautious. It means I'm taking back control of my finances. And if I discover more things you did without my knowledge or consent, I'll take the necessary steps. Steps? Are you threatening me, Dad? I'm informing you of my decision, Richard. Adult to adult. He laughed, a cold, incredulous sound. Sure. Let's see how long this lasts before you're begging for our help again. After hanging up, my hands shook so much I could barely make tea. Not from fear, but from a contained fury I hadn't felt in decades. The last time had been when Richard's school principal suggested that, as a single father, I might not have the structure to raise a child properly. Back then, I defended my right to be a father. Now, I was defending my right to be a person. The next day, I called Dr. Catherine Sanders and scheduled a consultation. While waiting for the appointment, I began systematically investigating what else Richard and Charlotte had done without my knowledge. I went through drawers, folders, old documents. What I found chilled me. The deed to my house in Philadelphia, which Elizabeth and I had bought 30 years ago with so much sacrifice, now included Richard's name as joint owner. My life insurance policy, originally naming both children as equal beneficiaries, now listed only Richard and Charlotte. Even my funeral plan had been altered, from a traditional burial as I wanted to a quick, cheap cremation. It was as if they weren't just robbing me in life, but erasing my wishes for after death. The phone rang. It was my daughter Louise, who lived in another state. Dad, what's going on? Richard just called saying you're acting strange, making accusations. I took a deep breath. It was time to bring more light to this situation. Louise, your brother has been transferring my money to his account without my knowledge. He altered documents for my house and insurance without consulting me. When I discovered it and confronted him, he said I should be grateful he still answers my calls. Silence on the other end. Then her voice came low and concerned. "Oh my God, Dad. Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I have bank statements, transfer records, everything documented." He said, "You're confused, that you're imagining things." Of course he said that, I thought. That's how it starts. Casting doubt on the person's sanity, making everyone question their perception of reality. "Louise, I've worked with numbers my whole life. I may be older, but I know how to spot when someone's siphoning my money." I heard her take a deep breath. "I'm booking a flight tomorrow to San Diego. I need to see this with my own eyes." When I hung up, I felt the first glimmer of hope in days. No matter what happened next, I wouldn't be facing it alone. Dr. Catherine Sanders's office was just like her, elegant, straightforward, without unnecessary frills. Seated behind a dark wood desk, she listened attentively as I explained my situation, with Louise by my side for moral support. My daughter had arrived the night before, and after examining the documents I'd gathered, she was horrified. "What Richard did," said Dr. Sanders when I finished, "constitutes financial elder abuse. It's both a crime and a civil offense. The good news is you acted quickly and we have substantial evidence." "What are our options?" asked Louise, holding my hand. "We can proceed on several fronts. First, we need to officially revoke any power of attorney Richard may have. Second, legally contest the changes to the house deed and insurance policies, which were made without informed consent. Third, we can file a civil suit to recover the diverted funds." The lawyer paused, looking directly at me. "There's also the option to file a criminal complaint. What your son did is fraud." The word hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable. Fraud, crime, my own son. "I want to recover what's mine," I said finally. "But I'm not sure I want to see my son in jail." Dr. Sanders nodded understandingly. "Many families feel the same. We can start with civil measures and see how Richard responds. If he cooperates, returns the funds, and signs the necessary revocations, we might avoid the criminal path." We left the office with a clear action plan and a renewed sense of purpose. Louise, always the family peacemaker, was quietly furious. "I never imagined Richard would do something like this," she said as she drove back to my house. "I always thought Charlotte was materialistic, but this is another level. People do terrible things when they believe they're right," I replied, gazing out at the passing trees. "And when they think no one's watching." That night, Louise and I reviewed more documents, uncovering even more evidence of the gradual control Richard had assumed over my financial life. Credit cards opened in my name, utility accounts transferred to his address, even an initial consultation with a real estate broker about selling my house, all without my knowledge. The doorbell rang at 9 the next morning. Richard was at the door, with Charlotte right behind. Their faces showed a mix of rage and false concern when they saw Louise open it. "What are you doing here?" he asked brusquely. "Visiting our father," Louise replied coldly. "Something you should try without bringing paperwork for him to sign." His face turned red. "What are you talking about? Who filled your head with that nonsense?" "Bank statements aren't nonsense, Richard," I replied, appearing behind Louise. "Neither are the altered deeds or insurance policies." "Can we come in and talk like adults?" interjected Charlotte, her professional smile firmly in place. "I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. We let them in but didn't invite them to sit." Instead, Louise laid the folder of documents we'd organized on the living room table. "Misunderstanding," she repeated, opening the folder. "Then explain why $2,500 leaves Dad's account every month straight to your joint account. Explain why his name was removed as primary owner of the house he paid for. Explain why you were consulting brokers to sell this house without his knowledge." Charlotte's smile faltered. Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he'd made since childhood when caught in a lie. "We were organizing everything for the future," he said, his voice lower now. "Dad's getting older. He needs oversight. The financial arrangements were just to ensure everything was in order." "What order?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "The order where you control everything and I have no access to my own accounts? The order where you can decide to sell my house behind my back?" "We weren't going to sell without telling you," exclaimed Charlotte. "We were just exploring options for when you need more intensive care." "And when would that be?" asked Louise. "When you decided it was now? When the house was worth more? When you needed the money for something?" Richard stepped forward, pointing a finger at Louise. You have no right to question our intentions. You're miles away, showing up once a year at Christmas, while we're here caring for him daily. Caring or looting, Louise shot back. Enough! My voice cut through the argument. They all turned to me, surprised by the volume and force. I'm not a child for you to fight over how to care for. I'm an adult with all my rights and mental faculties intact. And I'm informing you too, I said, looking directly at Richard and Charlotte, that I've hired a lawyer. I want all my money back. I want my name restored as sole owner of the house. I want all powers and authorizations revoked. Richard paled. You hired a lawyer? Against your own son? Against people who abuse my trust, I corrected. The fact that one of them is my son only makes it more painful, not less wrong. Charlotte let out a short, incredulous laugh. This is ridiculous. We were just trying to help. If you want to be ungrateful after everything we've done, fine. Let's go, Richard. She turned to leave, but Richard stayed rooted, his eyes fixed on mine. Do you really believe we stole from you? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. I don't believe. I know. The proof is right here. He glanced at the documents on the table, then back at me. Something in his eyes shifted. Not exactly remorse, but perhaps the first glimmer of understanding. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. Return what you took. Sign the documents Dr. Sanders will prepare. Respect my autonomy from now on. And if I don't? Then we'll face a judge, I replied simply. And all this evidence will be presented in court. Charlotte, at the door, stepped back. You're bluffing. You wouldn't sue your own son. I looked at her with a calm that surprised even me. Try me. After they left, Louise hugged me tightly. Dad, you were incredible. I returned the hug, feeling the tremor in my legs now that the adrenaline was fading. I'm tired of being seen as weak just because I'm old. Tired of pretending I don't see what's happening for fear of causing trouble. You were never weak, said Louise. You were just too kind. There's a difference. That night, while Louise slept in her old room, I sat on the balcony gazing at the stars. I thought of Elizabeth and what she'd say about all this. She'd always had a complicated relationship with Richard, loved him deeply but often frustrated by his selfishness. You have to be tougher on him, Elizabeth used to say, or one day he'll think the world owes him everything. It seemed that day had come, and Richard had decided I was the first creditor to collect from. The following weeks were a whirlwind of lawyer meetings, affidavits, and document reviews. Dr. Sanders worked with impressive efficiency, sending formal notification letters to Richard and Charlotte, the bank, the insurance companies, and the property registry. The key now is to establish a clear record of your objections to everything done without your informed consent, she explained. This strengthens our case, whether we settle or go to trial. Louise extended her stay another week, helping organize papers and serving as a witness for new documents. Before leaving, she introduced me to a friend who worked as a social worker specializing in seniors. Martha can help connect you with support groups, Louise explained, people who've been through similar situations. Initially, I resisted the idea. I didn't see myself as a vulnerable senior needing a support group. But after Louise's gentle insistence, I agreed to at least meet Martha. It was one of the best decisions I made. Martha was an energetic woman in her 50s, with a contagious laugh and zero patience for sentimentality. What your son did is criminal, she said bluntly in our first meeting, but unfortunately it's also incredibly common. You're not alone in this fight. She invited me to a meeting of what she informally called the Resistance Club, a group of seniors who'd faced or were facing financial abuse by family members. At first, I sat quietly in the circle, listening to stories that resonated painfully with mine. A 75-year-old woman whose nephew had mortgaged her house without her knowledge. An 83-year-old man whose son had emptied his retirement savings. A 70-year-old widow whose daughter had sold her family jewels while she was in the hospital. The worst isn't the money, said Vera, an elegant 81-year-old who'd become one of my closest friends. It's the betrayal. It's hearing, "You should be grateful," when we question it. It's being treated like incompetent children by the people we raised. I nodded, feeling tears in my eyes for the first time since it all began. Until then, I'd been so focused on action, on practical responses, that I hadn't truly processed the emotional pain. My son said I should be grateful he still answers my calls, I shared, my voice trembling, as if it were an extraordinary favor, not basic human decency. Vera placed her hand on mine. "And what did you say?" "In the moment, nothing. I was in shock, but now I'm responding with actions." A small smile crossed her face. "Good. The best response to you should be grateful is to show exactly what you're capable of." The group became my sanctuary in the months that followed. There, no explanations or justifications were needed for my pain. Everyone understood. Everyone had experienced that toxic mix of infantilization and exploitation that seemed reserved especially for seniors. More importantly, the group helped me see that what was happening wasn't my fault, not the result of some failure as a father. It was part of a broader pattern, a societal dynamic that allowed, and sometimes even encouraged, elder abuse. One afternoon, as I left a group meeting, I found Richard waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car. My heart raced, but I kept my posture straight and kept walking. "Dad," he called, "can we talk?" I stopped a few feet away. "About what?" "About all this." He gestured vaguely. "This process, these accusations." "They're not accusations, Richard. They're documented facts." He sighed deeply. "Look, maybe I overstepped in trying to help, but it wasn't my intention to hurt you." "Intention doesn't change the outcome," I replied. "And the outcome was that you abused my trust and tried to take control of my life without my consent. That's how you see it." His voice rose a bit. "After everything I've done for you these last years, the visits, the shopping, fixing things around the house, things you did voluntarily as a son, not as payment that gave you the right to control my life." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Charlotte and I split up. The revelation caught me off guard. I'm sorry to hear that. It's your fault, you know," he continued, bitterness evident in his voice. "This process, this elder rights lawyer. Charlotte said she won't stick around to see her career destroyed by fraud accusations." I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to accept the blame he was trying to place on my shoulders. "Your actions have consequences, Richard. If your marriage was so fragile it couldn't withstand you being held accountable for those actions. The problem isn't the process." His eyes widened, unaccustomed to this kind of resistance from me. I'd always been the conciliating father, the one who yielded to keep the peace. "What happened to you?" he asked finally, almost whispering. "I woke up," I replied simply. I realized I deserved more than forced gratitude for crumbs of consideration. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of family dynamics hanging between us. "Dr. Sanders sent the documents to your lawyer," I said finally. "Revocation of power of attorney, restoration of the house title, repayment plan for the funds." He nodded stiffly. "I saw them. Will you sign?" Richard looked at the ground, then back at me. "Do I have a choice?" "We always have choices, son. I choose not to be treated as incompetent anymore. You can choose to do what's right or face a judge." When he didn't respond, I turned to leave. "Dad," he called, his voice suddenly less confident. "After I sign, after everything's settled, will we still be family?" The question caught me off guard. I paused, but didn't turn. "That depends more on you than me," I replied finally. "Family is more than blood, Richard. It's respect, trust, honor. You broke all that, and it can't be fixed." The vulnerability in his voice almost made me turn. Maybe with time, with genuine actions, not empty words or false apologies. I kept walking to my car, feeling his eyes on my back. I didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, the legal process moved with surprising speed. Perhaps because the evidence was so clear, or maybe because Richard finally grasped the gravity of what he'd done. He signed all the documents without further resistance. The house deed was restored, with my name as sole owner. The automatic bank transfers were formally cancelled, and Richard agreed to a restitution plan for the diverted funds. The insurance policies were corrected and the powers of attorney revoked. "It's a quicker resolution than many cases I see," commented Dr. Sanders in our final meeting. "There's usually much more resistance, especially from children who genuinely believe they're acting in their parents' best interest." "Richard knows what he did," I replied. Deep down, he always knew. I left her office with a sense of closure, but not triumph. There were no real winners here. I'd regained my financial autonomy, but at an immense emotional cost: a distant son, a perhaps irreparably damaged relationship. At the group meeting that week, I shared the resolution of my case. "It's a victory," said Martha, the coordinator. "We must celebrate every victory, even the bittersweet ones." Vera, who'd become my confidant, squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" "Empty," I admitted. "Relieved but empty." "It's normal," she replied. "You're grieving, not for the loss of money or assets, but for the loss of the illusion that your son would never hurt you that way." Her words resonated deeply. That was exactly it. Grief. Grief for the relationship we thought we had, for the trust I'd believed existed, for the security of knowing my son saw me as a whole person, not just a burden or a resource. "When my daughter did something similar," Vera continued, "I spent months wondering where I'd failed as a mother. What could I have done differently so she wouldn't grow up thinking she had the right to make decisions for me, to treat me like an incompetent child?" I nodded, recognizing my own thoughts in her words. "And did you reach any conclusion?" I asked. "Yes," she replied with a small smile. I concluded the question was wrong. It wasn't about what I'd done as a mother. It was about the choices she made as an adult, about a society that normalizes disrespect towards seniors, about a system that confuses aging with incompetence. After the meeting, I walked to the nearby park in Austin and sat on a bench, watching children in the playground. Young parents watched attentively, helping when needed, but mostly letting the little ones explore on their own, even if it meant occasional falls and scraped knees. That's how I tried to raise Richard and Louise, providing support but allowing independence, helping but not controlling. Where had it gone wrong with Richard? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Louise. "How are you, Dad?" Her voice sounded concerned, even from miles away. "I'm okay, dear. The documents are all signed. Legally, everything's resolved. And emotionally?" I hesitated. "Complicated. I have good days and tough ones." "You did the right thing," she reassured me. "What Richard did, I can't even imagine how he thought it was acceptable." "He thought I wouldn't notice," I replied. "Or worse, he thought I should be grateful for his help even when that help was exploitation." We fell silent for a moment, the gravity of the situation lingering between us. "Richard called me yesterday," Louise said finally. My heart quickened. "What did he want?" "To talk about you, actually. He seemed different, less defensive. He said he's starting therapy." "Therapy?" I repeated, surprised. "Yes. Apparently, the divorce and this whole legal process forced him to face some things about himself. He mentioned his therapist suggested he might have unresolved issues with money and control." I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this. Richard in therapy, confronting his inner demons. It was more than I'd expected, honestly. "He asked if I thought you'd be open to talking to him someday," Louise continued. "Not now, but maybe in the future, when things hurt less." "What did you say?" "I said that was entirely up to you, that you have every right to set boundaries after what happened." I smiled faintly, grateful for my daughter's steadfastness. "Thank you for respecting that. Always, Dad. You deserve respect. Not forced gratitude, but genuine respect." After hanging up, I stayed on the bench, watching the clouds drift by. The idea of Richard in therapy, acknowledging his issues, was a small ray of hope in a previously overcast sky. It didn't mean everything was forgiven or forgotten. It didn't mean trust could be instantly restored. But it was a start, a tentative first step on a long road. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, not just financially, but socially and emotionally. I continued attending the support group, where I found not only understanding but true friendships. I started woodworking classes at the local community center in Miami, something I'd always wanted to try but never found time for during my working years. I joined a book club at the library. I volunteered once a week at a literacy program for kids, where my experience was valued, not dismissed. Slowly, I rebuilt a sense of purpose and identity separate from being just a father or widower. I became Edward again, whole, capable, alive. One afternoon, 3 months after the legal resolution, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Richard standing there holding a small box of cigars, my favorite brand. "Can I come in?" he asked, without the defensive tone that had marked our recent interactions. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door wider, for a quick coffee. As I prepared the coffee in the kitchen, I watched him look around the living room, noticing the changes I'd made. The new wood carvings on the shelves, the reading nook I'd created by the window, the absence of the family photos that once dominated the space. "Your house looks different," he commented when I returned with 2 mugs. I am different, I replied, sitting in the chair opposite the sofa where he sat. He nodded, accepting the mug I offered. Louise told me you're doing woodworking now. I'm not very good yet, but I'm enjoying the process. We sat in awkward silence for a few moments, both aware of the chasm between us. I'm in therapy, he said finally, twice a week. Louise mentioned it. How's it going? Hard. Revealing. I'm uncovering patterns, things about myself I didn't want to see. I waited, giving him space to continue. The therapist thinks I have issues with money and control, that I use them as substitutes for genuine emotional connection. He paused, swallowing hard. Apparently, it's common in people who grew up with financial insecurity. I thought of the tough years after Elizabeth's death, the piling bills, the overtime hours I worked, the way I always ensured Richard and Louise never knew how precarious our situation sometimes was. I never wanted you kids to worry about money when you were young, I said softly. I know. You always protected us, always put our needs first. He looked at me directly. But maybe I absorbed more than you thought. The anxiety, the fear, and instead of dealing with it healthily, I turned it into a need to control everything around me. Including your aging father, I added, without accusation, just statement. He nodded, shame evident on his face, including you. The irony is, I always told myself I was protecting you, taking care of you. But really, I was trying to control something that made me anxious. The idea of you getting older, maybe needing real care one day. And instead of talking to me about those worries, you decided to just take over. Yes, he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. And when you resisted, when you questioned, I got furious. Like you were being ungrateful for not appreciating my sacrifice. You should be grateful we still answer your calls, I quoted, the words still painful. He closed his eyes briefly, guilt plainly visible. There's no excuse for that. It was cruel and manipulative, and I'm deeply, deeply sorry. It was the first time he'd truly apologized, without justifications or mitigating explanations. Just a clear acknowledgement of the wrong and the harm caused. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot to hear it. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he continued. I know that will take time if it ever comes. I just wanted you to know I'm working on myself, trying to understand why I did what I did and how I can become a better person. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions, caution, hope, a pang of sadness for what we'd lost. I'm proud of you for seeking help, I said finally. That takes courage. A small smile crossed his face. I learned it from you. You've always been the bravest person I know. When he stood to leave a few minutes later, we lingered awkwardly at the door, neither sure how to say goodbye. A handshake seemed too formal, a hug too intimate for where we were. Can I call sometimes? He asked. Just to chat, no agenda, no attempts to help. I considered for a moment. You can. I don't promise I'll always answer, but you can call. He nodded, accepting the boundaries. It's more than I deserve. After he left, I sat again, gazing at the cigars he'd brought. They were fine, robust, but surprisingly smooth, just like the fragile hope beginning to bloom in my heart. 6 months passed since Richard appeared at my door with cigars and words of remorse. Months of slow rebuilding, not just of the relationship with my son, but of myself. The journey wasn't linear. There were days when rage returned, fresh and sharp, when I recalled his cruel words or the betrayal of trust. Days when I declined his calls, needing space to process my feelings. But there were also days of progress, cautiously honest conversations, small moments of reconnection, a shared meal at a neutral restaurant in Orlando, a visit to the cemetery on Elizabeth's death anniversary where we stood side by side in respectful silence. On one such afternoon, as we walked through the park after a tense but civil lunch, Richard asked something that caught me off guard. Do you think you'll ever trust me again, Dad? I stopped walking, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. Honestly, I don't know. Trust, once broken that way, is very hard to fully rebuild. He nodded, accepting my answer without arguing. But, I continued, I'm open to the possibility, not of going back to what we were before. That's impossible. But maybe building something new, based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. That's all I can ask for, he replied softly. In the therapy I'd started myself, a suggestion from the support group I'd initially resisted but now deeply appreciated, I worked on processing not just the recent betrayal but lifelong patterns. I realize now how I always put others' needs before my own, I confessed to Dr. Lucy in one session. First my parents, then Elizabeth, then the kids. I always defined myself by how much I could give, never by what I needed or wanted. And that led you to accept less than you deserved, she observed. Exactly. Until that moment on the phone, when Richard said I should be grateful, it was like a veil tore. Suddenly, I saw clearly how I'd allowed others to define my worth based on what I could do for them, not on who I am intrinsically. And who are you intrinsically, Edward? The question made me pause. Who was I? Beyond husband, father, professional? I'm discovering, I replied finally. I'm discovering I like woodworking, even if I'm never great at it, that I love contemporary poetry and hate science fiction, that I'm stronger, more resilient, and more capable than I was ever allowed to believe, or than I allowed myself to believe. My life expanded in unexpected ways. The support group led to genuine friendships that blossomed outside the original context. Vera and I started attending concerts together. Martha invited me to join a morning walking group. Michael, a 72-year-old widower from the group, shyly asked me to join him for a game of golf. Not a romantic outing, he explained hastily, just company. At home, I made small changes symbolizing my new independence. I painted one living room wall bright turquoise, a color Elizabeth always found too flashy. I rearranged furniture to create a woodworking space by the window with the best light. I planted an herb garden on the balcony, something practical, but also just for me. It was amid this ongoing transformation that I received an unexpected phone call from Charlotte, my ex-daughter-in-law, nearly a year after our confrontation in my living room. Edward, she said, her voice tense but controlled, I hope I'm not bothering you. You're not, I replied cautiously. What can I do for you? I'd like to talk in person. There are things I need to say. I hesitated, unsure of her intentions. Charlotte had always been harder to read than Richard, her polished surface rarely revealing true motivations. Just talk, she added, as if sensing my doubt. In a public place, if you prefer. I agreed to meet her at the cafe near the library in Denver, a neutral, busy spot. When I arrived, she was already there, seated at a back table, hands clasped around an untouched cup of tea. She looked different, thinner, paler, with dark circles makeup couldn't fully hide. The divorce had been hard on her too, I realized. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat. I'll admit I was curious, I replied. I didn't expect to hear from you. She gave a small, humorless smile. I imagine not, especially after everything. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension almost palpable. I made a mistake, she said finally, looking me straight in the eye. Several mistakes, actually, and I wanted to acknowledge that to you. Of all the things I'd imagined Charlotte might say, an admission of error wasn't among them. What Richard and I did wasn't just legally wrong, it was morally wrong, disrespectful, even cruel. I waited, letting her continue. I think I convinced myself we were really helping, that it was for your own good. But the truth is, it was about control, about money, about feeling important and needed, and about believing I was incapable of taking care of myself, I added. Yes, she admitted. We did that without even realizing how deeply disrespectful it was. And for that, I sincerely apologize. I studied her face for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But for the first time since I'd known her, Charlotte seemed genuinely vulnerable, her layers of professional sophistication momentarily stripped away. Can I ask what brought this change of perspective? I inquired. She stirred her cup, an unusual nervous gesture for her. My father was diagnosed with early Parkinson's. I'm helping him navigate the health system, the financial issues, and suddenly I found myself on the other side of the equation. Her eyes met mine again. I realized how devastating it would be if someone, even someone who loves you, started making decisions without your permission, speaking for you as if you weren't in the room, treating your autonomy as an obstacle to overcome, not a right to respect. Empathy through experience, I said. Sometimes, only when we step into the other's position do we truly understand the impact of our actions. I realized we were treating you exactly that way, she continued, and it shames me deeply. Thank you for acknowledging that, I replied, genuinely moved by her honesty. It means a lot. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she clarified, nor am I trying to resume any kind of relationship. I just needed you to know I recognize the wrong, that I'm sorry, and that I'm trying to do better with my father, with other seniors in my life. That's valuable in itself, Charlotte. We finished our coffee in a silent truce, not exactly friendly, but no longer hostile. Before parting, she handed me a small envelope. A gift card to that woodworking supply store near your house, she explained. Richard mentioned your crafting now. The gesture caught me off guard, not because it was grand, but because it was thoughtful in a way that acknowledged my interests, my identity beyond aging father. Thank you, I said, accepting the envelope. That's very kind. She smiled faintly. A genuine one this time. Good luck with your woodworking, Edward, and with everything else. As I walked home after the meeting, reflecting on the unexpected conversation, I realized something had shifted inside me. The knot of resentment I'd carried for so long had loosened slightly, not gone entirely. Some wounds leave permanent scars, but less constricting, less dominant. Forgiveness, I discovered, wasn't a single event, but a process. It wasn't granted once and for all, but something to be renewed daily, sometimes hourly. It wasn't for the offender's benefit, but for my own inner peace. And, most importantly, forgiveness didn't mean allowing the same patterns to repeat. It didn't mean relinquishing the boundaries I'd established so painfully. It simply meant I chose not to let the pain continue defining me. That night, sitting on the balcony as the sun set, I worked on a new wood carving with the tools bought with Charlotte's gift. Not a landscape or still life as usual, but an abstract self-portrait. Not as others saw me, but as I'd finally learned to see myself. Strong, worthy, complete. A man who no longer needed to apologize for taking up space in the world. A man who knew true gratitude could only exist where mutual respect thrived. A man who, at 69, finally understood his own value. 18 months had passed since that fateful phone conversation. 18 months since hearing my son say I should be grateful he still answered my calls. A lifetime in some ways, a mere moment in others. On a sunny spring Sunday, my house was filled with voices, laughter, and the aroma of fresh coffee. The support group that had been my refuge in the darkest times was gathered to celebrate Vera's birthday, now 83 and more vibrant than ever. Who would have thought, she commented as I poured more coffee, that a group formed from family betrayals would become our new family. I looked around the room at Martha, Michael, the other members who'd become dear friends, people who understood without need for explanations the complex path we'd walked, people who would never ask why we weren't grateful for the treatment we'd received. The family we choose, I replied, raising my mug in a toast. The doorbell rang and I went to answer, finding Louise at the door with her husband and kids. Behind them, more hesitant, was Richard. Hope you don't mind, said Louise, hugging me. We ran into Richard in the parking lot. He said you'd invited him for lunch too. I did invite him, I confirmed, opening the door wider. Come in, everyone. The last months had brought gradual changes to my relationship with Richard. Not a full reconciliation. Some wounds were too deep to heal completely, but a careful rebuilding, brick by brick. His therapy continued. So did mine. Sometimes we did joint sessions, untangling decades of complicated family dynamics under a therapist's patient guidance. As I entered the living room, introducing my biological family to my resistance club, as Martha jokingly called our group, I felt a strange sense of wholeness, not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because each person in that room represented an important part of my journey. Vera, who taught me that resistance wasn't just surviving but thriving. Martha, who showed me it's never too late to discover new facets of oneself. Michael, whose friendship had blossomed into a relationship neither of us expected in our golden years. Louise, whose unwavering loyalty had been my foundation in the toughest moments. Her children, my grandchildren, who reminded me that life goes on, constantly renewing itself. And Richard, my son who'd done terrible things for complicated reasons. My son who was fighting to be better, to understand his own demons. My son who'd learned, painfully, that love without respect isn't true love. As everyone chatted, mingling with initial curiosity and then growing animation, Richard approached me in the kitchen, where I was preparing more snacks. Interesting group, he commented, nodding toward Vera and the others. They seem to really appreciate you. They know me, I replied simply. Not just the idea of me, or the version of me they want me to be. They see me as I am. He nodded, helping me arrange the snacks on a tray. I'm trying to do that too, to see you as you are, not as I thought you needed to be. I looked at him, this grown man who'd once been the little boy clutching my hand so tightly on his first day of school. This man who'd hurt me so deeply and who was now trying, day by day, to repair the damage he'd caused. I know you are, I acknowledged, and I appreciate the effort. It's not effort, he said, surprising me. It's growth, painful at times, but necessary.